Qablozeh, or Eye of the Almond in Arabic, is a 5th century church located in the Idlib province in northern Syria. The church is known as Syria's finest example of early Romanesque architecture and is the first church to employ the aesthetic technique of having 2 twin towers flanking the entrance. This technique is also seen in Notre Dame. Notre Dame is seen as the pinnacle of French culture and architecture, even though it is Qablozeh that directly inspired its design. The misinformation is due to the erasure of the cross-cultural connection between Syrian and Middle Eastern architecture and Gothic cathedrals, much like Notre Dame. The artists are unknown, but the builders responsible are likely the same builders of Antioch who constructed the nearby Church of St. Simeon. Both churches were made at roughly the same time in 560s AD, and Qablozeh and the Church of St. Simeon were built using the same Syrian limestone building techniques and basilica-style layout. Qablozeh is a broad-aisled basilica-style church, which means that the interior has both a central nave as well as an aisle on each side. The facade of the church contains 2 3-story rectangular towers that flank the entrance. The main entrance is no longer apparent, and instead the facade visitors see today is the interior of the foyer. Some stylistic components of the church include sweeping arches and doorways and windows, as well as continuous bands of engravings that are seen throughout the exterior and interior. These engravings range from simple shapes to complex vegetal patterns. The arches and bands of engraving add movement and fluidity to the otherwise rectangular shape of the church. The apse is located on the eastern side of the church. This eastern-facing apse is now customary in Gothic architecture, but probably stemmed from Qablozeh. The apse is also exposed and protrudes outside of the rectangular perimeter of the building. The exterior of the apse has 6 decorative colonnettes that have a Corinthian order. The interior of the church is accessed from the north and shows a central nave and broadside aisles. The nave and the aisles are separated by 3 bowing arches that move the eye towards the honeycomb semicircular apse. This is where the altar would be. Above the arches and apse are 22 clerestory windows that illuminate the inside of the church. As aforementioned, Qablozeh possesses unique and revolutionary architectural assets like the clerestory windows, rounded arches between the nave and the aisles, and the protruding apse. These techniques created a new style of architecture called Romanesque. Romanesque architecture is a style that inspired Notre Dame. Qablozeh provided the missing links for the style break that occurred in French architecture amidst the Dark Ages. However, this could have only occurred if there was a cross-cultural connection between Europe and northern Syria. Today, this connection has been long forgotten, but thanks to the Crusades, it was more than plausible. Pilgrims, monks, and merchants traveled constantly between Syria and Europe. Frankish or French crusaders saw these church designs in the 12th century and brought many ideas back with them to Europe, where they were developed further. This established connection explains why so many of Qablozeh's techniques are seen in Notre Dame. The most prominent feature that Notre Dame took from Qablozeh is its twin tower design that flanks the grand arched portal entrance. This and the arches that divide the church into 3 broad aisles, as well as the clerestory windows, are all elements that were innovated in Syria, but are now boasted by the Gothic Cathedral of Notre Dame. The connection between Qablozeh and Notre Dame uncovers the true cultural connection between the East and the West. This decolonizes art history as it injects the reality that a lot of culture in the West has actually been appropriated or stolen. Qablozeh is an architectural marvel that is essential to the existence of Notre Dame. Qablozeh should be recognized as a beautiful and essential historical monument that provides a well-preserved look into Syrian architecture and the cross-cultural exchange between Syria and Europe. Even though it's a small church tucked within the hills of northern Syria, it should have a place in the historical canon, just like Notre Dame.